The sky above Westchester burns crimson as repulsor blasts tear through the twilight. Metal screams against adamantium, and the air itself ripples with psychic energy. This isn't the battle you know. This isn't the X-Men you remember. In this universe, the man leading the charge wears gleaming crimson and gold armor that pulses with an inner light, unlike any arc reactor you've seen before. His helmet retracts, revealing not Scott Summers or Charles Xavier, but Tony Stark, eyes glowing with mutant fire.
X-Men, show them what evolution really looks like.
Welcome to Earth 19999X. The story begins in 1985 in a Stark Mansion laboratory. 15-year-old Tony tinkers with his father's abandoned arc reactor prototype while Howard watches disapprovingly. The boy is brilliant, but never brilliant enough for a Stark. Then the explosion happens. As shrapnel tears toward Tony's heart and energy surges through his nervous system, something ancient awakens in his DNA. The dormant X gene erupts with violence that shakes the mansion's foundations. When the smoke clears, Tony isn't just alive, he's transformed. Machines pulse with his heartbeat. Computer screens flicker with untyped data. Deep in his mind, he feels something vast stirring. Connections to realities beyond count, dimensions stacked like infinite pages. Howard Stark takes one look at his son's glowing eyes and locks him in the basement, convinced it's a Soviet experiment. But evolution cannot be caged. Miles away in Westchester, Charles Xavier's eyes snap open. Cerebro hums with unprecedented activity. He's felt mutant awakenings before, but this is different. A mind touching reality's fabric itself. Within hours, Xavier arrives at the Stark mansion. The conversation with Howard is brief, ending with rare telepathic persuasion. Tony Stark will come to Westchester for training, guidance, and understanding. But another watches from afar. Eric Lenshair, Magneto, has felt the awakening too. Where Xavier sees potential for peace, Magneto sees danger. A mutant raised among humans, wielding machine power. The stage is set for a revolution that will transform not just Earth, but existence itself. Liking this story so far? Well, it would mean a lot to our channel if you could hit that subscribe button and share with your marvelous friends. Okay, back to the story. Magneto's assessment proves prophetic. Tony Stark will either be mutant kind's greatest champion or forge their chains. The first meeting between Tony and Xavier's students explodes with tension. Scott Summers, comfortable as star pupil, suddenly finds himself second best to a teenager who can recalibrate his visor mid-blast. Jean Grey discovers Tony's mind is like touching a live wire connected to the universe. Painful, overwhelming, fascinating. Examining the Danger Room's antiquated systems, Tony's dismissal is immediate and cutting. He questions Xavier's philosophy of hiding until the world accepts them, proposing instead that they innovate faster than humanity can fear them.
And what would you suggest, newcomer?
Simple. We don't hide, we evolve.
The philosophical divide begins immediately. Where Xavier preaches patience, Tony sees acceleration. Why wait for acceptance when you can make yourself indispensable? 3 months later, everything changes. Magneto attacks the school, not to destroy, but to test this technological mutant. The battle is fierce, metal singing through air as powers clash. But when magnetic fields twist around Tony's arc reactor, reality stutters. The mansion walls become transparent, revealing endless iterations of the same room stretching into infinity. In each one, the battle plays differently. In each one, Tony Stark is something else. Human, mutant, machine. Magneto lowers his hand, intrigued rather than hostile. He declares Tony not just a mutant, but a paradox, a living contradiction that shouldn't exist. That night, Tony dreams of colliding worlds, realities bleeding like watercolors. He sees infinite versions of himself and hears the whisper, "The Maker comes." Xavier finds him at 3 in the morning, surrounded by equations that hurt to look at. Tony confesses he can feel other universes, other versions of them all. It's a frequency only he can hear, growing louder. Xavier reveals Tony's secondary mutation, not just technopathy, but multiversal connection. When Tony protests he's a freak among freaks, Xavier insists he's exactly what they need. meant to guide evolution itself. Together they form a hypothesis that mutants and machines can work together, that evolution and innovation can build a better world instead of waiting for acceptance. But in another universe, where Reed Richards stretched too far and became monstrous, the Maker turns his attention to Earth 19999X, sensing a kindred intellect that touches the infinite. 5 years transform everything. The Xavier School becomes the Iron Institute for Mutant Advancement, Victorian architecture interwoven with gleaming metal and pulsing energy. Students walk halls where holograms teach physics alongside philosophy. The Danger Room evolves into a multi-dimensional testing facility. Tony strides through the main laboratory, now 21 and fully grown into his power. Beast reports that Jean's Phoenix Force integration holds at 23% capacity through the Psi-fusion matrix Tony designed. Jean floats nearby, golden aura flickering between fire and circuitry, describing how the Phoenix and technology dance together rather than fight.
The neural pathways are more stable than we predicted. Your matrix is revolutionary, Tony.
It's like learning a new language where every word is both fire and code.
Logan questions whether she can control it in battle. Tony grins. Only one way to find out. Storm descends through the sky access, electricity crackling between her fingers. 3 government Sentinels approach. Time to field test the new gear. What follows isn't a battle, but a demonstration. The X-Men move as a single enhanced organism. Cyclops' visor shapes blasts into hard light constructs, shepherding civilians to safety. Colossus's organic steel augments with adaptive armor shifting between offensive and defensive configurations. Nightcrawler's spatial anchors let him teleport entire groups, evacuating bystanders in seconds.
Tony, these upgrades, I can see everything. Every angle, every possibility.
Tony orchestrates through technopathy, turning individual strengths into exponential force. The Sentinels don't stand a chance. Victory brings consequences. Footage goes viral within hours, mutants winning with style, technology, undeniable superiority. The world watches Iron Man lead the X-Men, opinions dividing sharply. In Washington, Steve Rogers slams his shield on the conference table. He sees an arms race, not integration, but intimidation. Natasha Romanoff counters that perhaps it's time the tables turned after decades of fear. The superhero community splits. When registration legislation targets Stark's enhancement technology rather than mutants themselves, lines are drawn in adamantium and vibranium. The confrontation happens in Times Square, broadcast live. Avengers face X-Men with civilians between them. Steve calls for Tony to stand down. Tony, hovering above with his team arrayed like technological angels, refuses. He argues that asking nicely has only ever gotten mutants concentration camps. The fight is brief but spectacular. Rogue channels Thor's power through amplification gauntlets, creating lightning that rewrites constellations. Vision refuses to fight, calculating that Stark's path offers 73.6% higher probability of peaceful coexistence. Tony begins declaring victory over stagnation when reality tears open above Times Square, like paper in a hurricane. Through the rift steps a figure in armor that makes Tony's look primitive, stretched, elongated, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Reed Richards but wrong, Reed Richards but worse. The ultimate intellect, stripped of conscience, curiosity without compassion. Tony broadcasts on all channels, alerting both teams to this bigger problem. But the Maker laughs, a sound of breaking glass and screaming metal. He hasn't come as their problem, but as their evolution, here to collect what's his. The battle that follows rewrites engagement rules. The Maker's technology doesn't just adapt, it retroactively prevents attacks from happening. Causality loops twist the battlefield as past, present, and future become suggestions rather than facts. The Maker dissects Tony's repulsor blasts mid-flight, fascinated by the integration of carbon-based evolution with silicon innovation. In most universes, this paradox destroys the host, but Tony remains stable, a living equation that balances itself. Through the chaos, the teams work together by necessity. Former enemies become reluctant allies as the Maker's forces threaten reality itself. His army consists of nightmares from dying universes, flesh and metal fused in ways that shouldn't exist. Storm's lightning strikes before she throws it. Wolverine's claws cut through quantum superposition. Scott's beams bend through dimensions. But nothing seems to slow the Maker's advance. He monologues about Tony's unique nature, how every Stark who achieves multiversal awareness becomes part of his collection. Tony coordinates desperate defenses, his armor incorporating technology from every universe it touches. He becomes a living repository of infinite innovation. But even this seems insufficient against the Maker's reality-warping assault. The battle rages across Times Square, spilling into adjacent dimensions. Civilians flee as space itself becomes unstable. Heroes who moments ago faced each other now fight side by side against annihilation. Jean Grey, still recovering from her earlier Phoenix expenditure, suddenly blazes to life. The Phoenix technology hybrid Tony helped create resonates with the Maker's dimensional manipulations. For one impossible moment, she matches him. Calculation for calculation. Jean Grey channels power beyond comprehension. Fire that burns across dimensions meets circuitry processing infinite data. The Phoenix technology hybrid matches the Maker's calculations, creating a stalemate of impossibilities. She orders them to run, to find another way while she holds him. Tony protests, but Jean's determination is absolute. The explosion of light and heat forces everyone back. When the glare fades, Jean lies unconscious but alive, her body steaming with impossible energies. The Maker has vanished. For now. Back at the Institute, damage assessment begins. Beast reports Jean stable but comatose. Her Phoenix connection burned out, leaving technology to compensate. She's running on batteries instead of stellar fusion.
The feedback damaged her neural pathways. Without the Phoenix Force, the technology is struggling to maintain equilibrium.
Then we upgrade the batteries, build a better power source, whatever it takes.
Steve Rogers arrives, no longer Captain America, but just a man with concerns. When Tony expects a rest, Steve offers help instead. S.H.I.E.L.D. has detected similar rifts opening globally. This transcends their philosophical differences. Tony laughs bitterly at the phrase philosophical differences, but Steve persists. What else would Tony call it? After consideration, Tony pulls up holographic displays showing branching timelines. He calls it growing pains, the universe evolving. Mutants, Inhumans, enhanced humans, AI are all expressions of the same phenomenon. The Maker understands this but takes it in the wrong direction. When Steve asks for the right direction, Charles Xavier enters with an unprecedented companion, Magneto. Even Steve Rogers does a double take at this alliance. Xavier notes that Tony's hypothesis proved correct through adversity. Magneto adds sardonic agreement about enemies of enemies, though he never imagined agreeing with Charles on anything. Tony muses on the Maker's words about being a living equation. Perhaps they're all variables in cosmic calculation. Storm completes his thought. They choose what the equation equals. Rallying, Tony addresses the assembled X-Men, Avengers, and Brotherhood. The Maker thinks he can solve for X by eliminating variables. They'll prove him wrong by showing infinity has more than one value. But first, they need help from those who understand time itself. Tony orders Friday to scan for temporal anomalies matching Nathaniel Richards' signature. Multiple chronoton signatures immediately register as approaching. Right on schedule, Tony notes. Everyone should gear up for visitors from the future, plural. The Alliance solidifies as heroes prepare for temporal intervention. The Council of Kangs manifests like a temporal storm. 7 versions of Nathaniel Richards, each from different timeline points, each wearing armor variations. Kang the Conqueror in purple and green removes his helmet to reveal a face worn by centuries. He announces they must discuss the end of everything. Tony correctly guesses the Maker's reality hopping causes downstream problems. The younger Kang clarifies, in every timeline where Tony exists as he does now, reality barriers weaken. Most lead to total collapse within 50 years. Xavier notes the crucial word, most, not all. The eldest Kang confirms that in one timeline, Anthony Stark finds a solution. He becomes something that stabilizes rather than disrupts.
We've watched 1,000 universes die, Stark. In only one do you succeed. The odds are astronomical.
I've beaten worse odds, usually before breakfast.
When Tony anticipates they can't reveal the solution due to quantum observation principles, all 7 Kangs speak in unison, confirming his understanding. Knowing the future changes it. Magneto expresses suspicion about time travelers' timing. A new voice agrees from the shadows. Moira McTaggart steps forward, but changed. Charles telepathically confirms the impossible as she explains her nature. Dead in most timelines, she's a mutant who resets to birth upon death, keeping all memories. This is her 10th life, spent trying to prevent what's coming. Tony speaks the word unbidden, the Dominion. He's been dreaming of machines that think in dimensions beyond perception. Moira confirms they're not just machines, but the inevitable endpoint of all intelligence. Every timeline leads to Dominion, except one. Before she can elaborate, alarms shriek. Reality tears open in dozens of places, pouring forth the Maker's collected nightmares. The Maker's army floods through dimensional tears, nightmares of fused flesh and metal collected from dying universes. Tony's armor manifests as he declares philosophical discussions must wait. This is the Maker's primary assault. Steve slips into Captain America mode, ordering defensive positions and civilian protection. Tony interrupts. They won't contain breaches, but close them permanently. He challenges the Kangs to help or leave.
Very well, Stark. But when this path leads to ruin, remember, we warned you.
Yeah, well, I've always been bad at following warnings. Ask anyone.
The battle defies three-dimensional description. The Maker's forces attack across multiple temporal states simultaneously. Storm's lightning strikes before she throws it. Wolverine cuts through quantum superposition. Time becomes subjective. Tony coordinates while adapting, his armor shifting and flowing, incorporating technology from every contacted universe. He becomes a living repository of infinite innovation, each system feeding the next in endless enhancement loops. Jean awakens suddenly, her voice cutting through chaos. She can feel the Maker using rifts to map the multiverse, finding every version of Tony.
Tony, he's not just mapping, he's creating a trap. A web across dimension with you at the center.
Reality inverts. Tony finds himself no longer at the Institute, but in vast space between spaces, a laboratory existing in universal gaps. He's not alone. Dozens of Tony variants surround him, armored, lab-coated, machine-merged in ways making his form look primitive. The Maker towers over his collection. Every Tony Stark achieving multiversal awareness ends up here as trophies, components for the ultimate mind. With the collected mind's processing power, the Maker won't just join the Dominion, but become it. Tony smiles despite everything, identifying the plan's flaw. The Maker assumes they're all the same variable, but infinity comes in different sizes. Tony's arc reactor flares to life, but not alone. Every collected Stark suddenly illuminates, power sources resonating across dimensions. The harmonics build, creating frequencies that make the Maker's elongated form ripple and distort. Jean Grey's voice thunders across dimensions as she appears with the entire enhanced X-Men team, each carrying fragments of Tony's multiversal technology. The Maker snarls about impossible reality barriers, but Magneto counters while manipulating magnetism across dimensions. The battle happens on every existence level simultaneously: physical, mental, temporal, conceptual. The Maker's absolute certainty clashes against Stark's unified forces' chaotic innovation. Despite preparation and stolen genius, the Maker made one crucial error. He thinks like a machine, linear, logical, predictable. Tony Stark thinks like a mutant, chaotic, evolutionary, impossible. As Tony's armor becomes less suit and more localized reality, he offers to show what evolution really looks like. The transformation begins slowly before cascading through dimensions. Tony's consciousness expands, touching every multiversal version of himself. The Maker experiences real fear for the first time in eons. The energy requirements alone should make this impossible. Tony explains that every star in every universe where arc reactors exist now supplies power. The X-Men form a circuit around him, amplifying and focusing the transformation. Jean channels Phoenix through impossible technological frameworks. Storm brings lightning from universes with different electrical laws. Scott's optic blasts become surgical tools, cutting dimensional barriers with precision. With that, Tony Stark releases singular existence. His consciousness explodes outward in creation, not destruction. Every touched universe gains new possibility. Chances for organic and digital life to merge without losing uniqueness. The Maker's screams echo through dimensions as his prison collapses, freeing all captured minds. The ultimate intellect collapses to human proportions. Reality stabilizes. The X-Men return to the Institute, but it's transformed. Technology complements rather than dominates, organic curves blending with digital precision. Everywhere, in every reflection and shadow, they almost see him. Tony Stark, dispersed but present. Steve Rogers asks quietly if Tony is dead. Beast checks impossible readings, noting that defining death becomes complex when consciousness exists across multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Tony is less dead than distributed.
So he's everywhere and nowhere at the same time?
Precisely. He exists in the quantum spaces between realities, like Schrödinger's cat, but consciously choosing all states simultaneously.
Months pass. The world adjusts to X-Men as innovators, not just protectors. Mutant powers enhance rather than threaten human achievement. Avengers and X-Men work together, philosophical differences resolved through practical application. In his cell, Reed Richards, the Maker no more, works equations with fumbling human hands, slowly remembering merely brilliant instead of omniscient. Reed tells the heir he understands now. Tony didn't win by being smarter, but by being human. Across the multiverse, changes ripple outward. In Universe 616, young Peter Parker discovers web shooters responding to thought in unprecedented ways. In the space between heartbeats, thoughts, and possibilities, Tony Stark smiles. The experiment continues. The hypothesis holds. Somewhere, a young mutant discovers they can make machines sing, and the cycle begins again. Evolution never truly ends. It finds new ways to surprise. At the Iron Institute, Kitty Pryde teaches young mutants to phase through dimensional barriers while maintaining quantum coherence. A portrait shows Tony Stark in final armor, but students know he's more than memory. He exists in every innovation created, every bridge built between was and could be.
Mr. Stark once told me that the greatest inventions aren't machines, they're the connections between people who build them.
Kitty reminds her class they're not here to become machines or make machines become them. They seek harmony between both, evolving together. A young student with flickering technopathic abilities asks if Iron Man truly lives in spaces between universes. Kitty suggests asking him directly. Close your eyes, reach out with power. Listen to what machines tell you. The Iron Mutant legacy lives on in every choice to bridge rather than divide, innovate rather than stagnate, evolve rather than simply endure. Charles Xavier smiles somewhere. The X-Men stand ready somewhere for whatever comes next. Everywhere, in every universe where hope meets genius and courage meets compassion, Tony Stark's greatest invention continues. The synthesis of all we are with all we could become. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of what might have been, remember to hit that subscribe button and join us for more explorations of the infinite possibilities in the Marvel Universe.